name's Grace Ann. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm majoring in biochemistry. I'm on a pre-med track here, and I'm minoring in math and poverty studies. I kind of stumbled into the Shepherd program on accident. My registration went really poorly freshman year, and I happened to see that this POV 101 course had a ton of extra seats. So I hopped in. I later found out that there were a ton of extra seats in this class because the other two sections of POV 101 were so full that they had just opened up another section and emailed the people on the wait list. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And I am very thankful that I was. POV 101 was definitely my favorite class of the fall term of my freshman year. I grew up in an upper middle class bubble in Nashville, Tennessee, and this class really just expanded my worldview, taught me how to think critically, to engage with perspectives that are different than my own, and to kind of really look at the world and our country on an intellectual level about, what really does poverty look like. And I loved the class, and so I continued to take a ton of poverty studies courses here, filling, I think, all but one or two of my electives with poverty studies courses. So I've taken, literary approaches to poverty. I'm currently in a poverty law school class. I even studied abroad with the poverty studies, healthcare systems and poverty course. But my favorite by far, and I'm sure Mr. Watt might address this as well, was my spring term of my sophomore year when I took the course at Augusta Correctional Center, in which 10 inmates and 10 W&L students studied the works of Martin Luther King Jr. and how we as a society can promote love, justice, and forgiveness. I think I grew more in those 4 weeks than I really ever have. As a science major, I love objective answers. I love black and white, but I learned how to kind of lean into those questions that don't have answers. And I think even better than that was I learned how to lean into questions in which people disagree. I hate conflict, but I learned to kind of embrace controversy and to reevaluate my own thoughts and opinions as I continue to form and shape them. The familiar narrative that I'd had about prison populations started to shift as we together radically envisioned what a society could look like in which everyone loves each other unconditionally, forgives without limits, and pursues justice for all people. But I was also kind of heartbroken because I got to leave the prison every day and return to my safe college campus. And there was nothing that I could do or say or fix or solve to make the injustices that we talked about in that classroom go away. That beautiful space and that beloved community was encapsulated quite literally by bars of this broken system in a broken world. And I remember sitting in Professor Pickett's office hours as I was preparing my final speech for that class. And that's the one and only time I have ever cried in front of a professor. I was so at a loss of what to do or say. I felt like any impact that I could make would be like trying to drain an ocean with a pipette. And Professor Pickett looked at me and told me to envision myself in a hallway with 100 doors, all of which led to respecting the human dignity of all people. So I just had to pick one. So I left the class a little drained and went into the summer determined to find my door. Conveniently, that was also the summer of my Shepherd internship. You don't really want to go into your Shepherd internship feeling drained. That summer turned out to be one of the most rejuvenating summers that I could have asked for. I interned with the Camden Coalition of Healthcare Providers in Camden, New Jersey, and we focused on serving underserved populations and addressing systemic healthcare issues. So I got to combine my poverty studies interest with my healthcare interest. The days were hard for sure, sitting at patients' bedsides and listening as they tell you about their lack of housing or food was really hard. But I saw a lot of hope and purpose there because my organization was fighting this fight against poverty on so many fronts, and healthcare was just one. And healthcare, that's what I was excited about. That was my door. And I finally saw that connection between poverty studies and my interest in medicine. And I learned that I wasn't fighting the fight alone. My concern with picking that one door was that I left 99 other doors that still needed to be opened. But I was with this cohort of 7 other people that were equally committed to fighting the fight against poverty in their own sector, whether that be food or housing or business. We had a great time together. They became some of my best friends. We adventured around Camden and Philly together, even donating our blood in exchange for Six Flags tickets, the things that you do on a Shepherd budget. I see Jeremiah down there. We did that together. But we also had some of the great conversations about the causes of poverty and how we wanted to play our part in addressing it. And so I came back to campus and started to like learn and think more about what I wanted my role to be. And I went to this Young Alumni Weekend panel. I went to 2 back-to-back panels, one hosted by the Pre-Health Club and then one hosted by Shepherd, the Living the Shepherd Dream program. Both were alumni in healthcare professions. And the pre-health one I went to and I like left a little scared. I was like, wow, there are a lot of like hoops I need to jump through. I'm a little stressed. But then when I went to the Living the Shepherd Dream one, I encountered alumni that like were so clearly passionate about their work. And I left and I called my parents and I was like, this is what I want to do. This is who I want to be like. That's how I want to make my impact. I definitely still have lots of questions about my future, but I have no doubt that I will be equipped because of Shepherd to really make an impact in serving and loving all people.
I'm Lorena, and I'm also a senior, as Jenny had said. So I'm from Mexico City, but I moved to Texas and grew up there. So this duality of identities has been very much consistent throughout my life. And another piece to that I found while living in Texas was that I had a really strong passion for working with people with special needs or disabilities. So when looking at a college, I knew that these 3 things were just consistently in the back of my mind as something that I wanted to continue to be able to express. And Shepherd was really the place where I found I could do that. So first, when I came to visit, I was asking around within different departments, asking if there was somewhere where I could still work with people with autism specifically. And someone, yes, they didn't really know exactly who to reach out to for that, but they were like, no, I don't think that this is the place, the school for you if that's what you want to be doing. And I was like, okay, it seems a little funny to me, but I'll take it and run with it. And thankfully, I ended up going to a Shepherd open house right after that, where I met Marissa Charlie, and told her this story. And she was like, no, that is not the case at all. Her husband used to work at BRAC. So she paired us up and told me about the Bonner program. So through the Bonner program, I applied, was super excited about it, and was like, perfect, this is something that I can take service that I'd been doing for a while, but on a very like surface level within just high school. Was the only thing that was available to really deepening the service. The Blue Ridge Autism and Achievement Center. So just a place where I could deepen that service and see if it was something that I could shape into a career. So going through all of that, started volunteering with BRAC, and I've been doing it since. I actually just finished my capstone this morning with them. And I was just really excited to be able to continue doing this, but I didn't really realize to what extent it would keep shaping what I wanted to keep doing after my 4 years here were over. So a little bit after that, with that duality of identities that I mentioned earlier, within being from Mexico City and speaking Spanish, and that just being a very prevalent part of my identity here, that wasn't always, not necessarily recognized, but I never really saw it as something celebrated here. And within the Shepherd program, that was completely different. So Fran Elrod reached out to me to pioneer a Shepherd internship in Mexico, in Puerto Morelos, and spearheaded with, we really need someone who speaks Spanish and knows this culture a little bit already. So seeing that piece of my identity celebrated was just very, very different, I think, than the typical departments here. Not as a hit on any other departments, but as a definitely good thing about Shepherd. So I did that the summer after my freshman year and had a blast. So much fun, but I was still trying to go back to the piece of wanting to volunteer with people with special needs and just work with them in some capacity. And this internship was very much focused on language. So I ended up finding this link that I wasn't really looking to find during this internship, but there was a really big cultural difference in how special needs were viewed and approached within Mexico and the US from what I had experienced. So within just having conversations, this window of the link between communication and the work that I wanted to do with people with disabilities really opened up. And so coming back here after that internship and continuing my work with BRAC, and as I mentioned within this capstone, the links that I really wanted to focus on were between how language, I'm also a cognitive and behavioral science major and Romance languages major. So mixing those two things of languages and psychology and Shepherd, it kind of left me in a void of like, okay, well, what job does that look like? Like, I have no idea how to mix these three things. So moving forward now, after that international opportunity and the focus on language that I realized was really where I wanted to sit within, similarly to Grace Ann with those doors, like the language door, I guess we'd call it, is where I want to be. So I've been working this semester with Special Olympics within their global youth department. And hopefully that's something that I could continue to do, whether it be specifically with them or just overall really mixing this international piece, languages, and just a global view within how special needs are approached and served in all cultures, not necessarily with the US as the standard to reach for, but just really understanding where those views are coming from, and language being the way in which we talk about them, obviously. So I don't know exactly where that will lead me, but I definitely know that Shepherd has been the rope leading me through.
Hey, I'm Christopher Watt. I'm also a senior, obviously. I'm majoring in economics and minoring in environmental studies, as well as poverty studies. My experience with Shepherd actually started in high school. My mom went here and was on trustee, and so growing up, I'd heard a lot about WNL and was exposed to the Shepherd program from her talking about it. And so when I began touring colleges, I was like, oh, wow, I definitely want to check out WNL, of course, and I want to engage with the Shepherd program. Service was really important to me in high school. And I grew up very exposed to problems of rural poverty, like food insecurity and educational disparities. I think I mentioned I'm from Thomasville, Georgia, South Georgia. But wasn't really sure what that was going to look like for college. I definitely wanted to find ways to engage with service organizations and hopefully incorporate that in my academic work, but wasn't sure what that was going to look like. So on a tour, I actually got to sit in on Professor Pickett's POB 101 class and was amazed to, first of all, be exposed to not only issues related to poverty that I had not been familiar with prior, but also kind of the ethical dimension of poverty studies. And that was one of the key pieces that drew me to WNL ultimately. So once I got to WNL, like Grace Ann, I took POB 101 my first semester of college, and again, got to take this deeper dive into some of the more ethical dimensions related to poverty studies, as well as just engage in these amazing conversations with fellow students about what the human experience looks like from different backgrounds and experiences, but also across our shared human experiences, and how we bring our different expertises, strengths, and even weaknesses to the table to address various deprivations of human life. And following my first year, following that academic work, I wanted to do something. I wanted to do a Shepherd internship after my first year that was going to be really different for me. That was going to expose me to issues that I hadn't grown up around, what Fran Elrod termed a deep dive. And so I actually got placed in New York City, town of 20,000 to the big city was a big change for me, with the Bowery Residence Committee, which is a homeless outreach organization that focuses in the subways and actually focuses on those experiencing homelessness who are considered to be resistant, who have chosen not to take up housing services. And as a part of that experience, I got to walk subways every day with some coworkers, and whenever I came across people who appeared to be experiencing homelessness, we would just have a conversation, start talking to them in hopes of connecting them with different services based on their needs. But it was really just getting to have conversations. And that was so powerful for me because I definitely came into the big city a bit intimidated, as well as carrying some stigmas that I'd been exposed to about what the experience of a homeless individual is. Definitely some preconceived notions about drug use and mental illness. And it was in these conversations that human element really came in. And I began to appreciate that even though we have very different life experiences, we have shared aspirations, desires, and goals as humans. And we were able to meet kind of at that level, which was so powerful for me. I actually remember one conversation with a woman towards the end of my experience who talked to me about this concept of Big Apple. She was talking about this experience of being from New York. There's this idea of Big Apple and then being a New Yorker. And that no matter what someone's experience is, whether they work on Wall Street or live in the streets, they have this shared element of community by trying to just figure out how to get by in life during the hustle bustle of the city. And that just was really transformative in that experience of me also appreciating that it's not just physical needs that people need as part of addressing human deprivation, but also immaterial needs like self-identity and autonomy. And so I carried that experience with me as I also joined in the King class with Grace Ann and Professor Pickett, which was Grace Ann spoke to it so well. I can't describe it like she did, but it was such a beautiful community of people who came into a room together with definitely some preconceived notions about one another, or more just a lack of understanding from our different backgrounds, and just got to experience this beautiful, what King we believe would have turned a beloved community, in which all people are loved and appreciated, and honored and respected as for their human dignity. And that was, like Grace Ann said, just the most beautiful month of my life, but also hard to experience because I got to walk out every day. But yet we still had built these relationships that I feel, even though we don't physically stay in contact, will remain with me for the rest of my life. And who knows, maybe we'll get to connect on the outside again soon. But following that experience, I recognized that this piece of poverty studies that was so interesting to me, that I felt so engaged with, was addressing needs that aren't so much physical, but improving upon people's autonomy, improving upon the other aspects of well-being. And my capstone experience actually has really been the culminating piece of my WNL academic experience, and I was fortunate to be able to do it during my junior year. And it was amazing because it allowed me to connect both my academic and my personal interests. So namely poverty studies with my interest in conservation, as well as my personal passion for fishing. I love fly fishing, grew up fly fishing and hunting in South Georgia. And I actually had a conversation with Professor Pickett coming into college during an interview about my various interests, but my inability to see where they all came together. And during my Shepherd capstone, I actually did a research project on poverty in artisanal fishing communities around the world. And excuse me. And that allowed me to connect this recognition that I have this passion for this recreational activity that is actually the foundation for the livelihood of many of people around the world. And not only is it an important piece of their livelihood, it's being affected by a crisis that faces the world right now, which is the global fisheries crisis, declining fish stocks around the world, but also affects subsequently their means of identity and cultural past. And I don't think that was very well recognized in management. And so I did my research project on that. And then building from there, I'm actually hoping to do that professionally now. So this past summer, I worked with IndieFly, which is a conservation and economic development organization. And we built like a metric basically to evaluate socioeconomic impacts of fisheries management. That's kind of my experience with Shepherd. It's really allowed me to bring all my interests together, and who knows what's next.
Oh, that was such a good 1, 2, pop.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna jump
One.
at some point.
Wait, are we jumping?
Are we jumping?
One. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Jump.
Or we just
Okay.
So it's like a.
Wouldn't it be funny if they did it and like fell right into the first floor class?
This is
I mean, it's just the office. Yeah. Okay,
Maybe
so.
jumping is not a
Okay.
good.